So good morning, everybody, and I'm just thrilled to see so many of you out here on Sunday morning. It's a brutal time, noon on Sunday, but we're thrilled to have you. And I wanted to introduce our guests to this panel on crowdfunding to independence with Seed and Spark. By now, those of you who have seen me throughout the festival, I am the co-founder, run the Athena Center for Leadership Studies here at Barnard. My job, for the most part, is to thank people. So the first thing I want to do is to thank all of you for coming, for bringing your friends to the festival, for talking us up. It's really, really wonderful to see us grow over now 6 years. I also want to thank our sponsors, our founding sponsor, the Artemis Rising Foundation, and Regina Kulik-Scully, who is their CEO and president. I want to thank them. They have been with us for a number of years now and have really taken the festival to the next level. On screen earlier, you saw a whole listing of people, our platinum, gold, bronze, and silver level sponsors, all of whom have come in to help us support this wonderful endeavor, particularly HBO Documentary Films, who's in at the platinum level, and that's really terrific. Before I introduce our guests, I just want to remind you that we have a whole lot of movies for the rest of the day. We end the festival with the showing of Code Girl at 6 p.m. in the Diana Center event oval, and we're going to have a panel following that with a number of not only Barnard students who work on coding in a program that I run, but other people who are working in ensuring STEM education for young women. So that should be a very inspiring movie. So we hope that you will join us for that. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest. We have with us today Erica Anderson, who's the head of crowdfunding and education at Seed and Spark, and has been in charge of, as she says, most things crowdfunding, community, filmmaker, and Twitter related for the last 3 years. So we're thrilled to have her here. Prior to joining Seed and Spark, Erica was a producer with Second Photo Productions, a full-service production company that did a whole range of brand marketing for a variety of very well-known clients, everybody from Target to ESPN to Martha Stewart, American Express, etc. So it's great.
That is not in my bio.
My favorite piece of Erica lore is that she helped with a startup called My Mom's Pie.
I did indeed.
Which was really just cooking pies in the kitchen until she got a hold of it, and now is a nationally recognized brand. So, Erica, it's all yours. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi, welcome. My Mom's Pie is also my family's company, so it's like my great-grandmother's recipe. It was a very easy thing to market. Welcome. I am Erica, and just to give you a really sort of brief introduction to what this workshop is going to be, this was developed out of a need to speak with filmmakers and work with filmmakers to help you start thinking about not just your one film that you need to get funded, but really your career. And crowdfunding is a tool that is incredibly useful for getting a single film made, but it's also the tools that you need and the muscles that you need to build in order to successfully crowdfund are the same ones that you need to really build a sustainable career for yourselves. So I will tell you a little bit about what we do. This is not a timeshare for Seed and Spark by any means, but a lot of the examples that I will give will be from Seed and Spark campaigns and will be film related. But all of this information can be used, most of you are probably filmmakers here anyway, but a lot of it can be used for any time you need to build an audience and figure out how to reach people with the things that you're making. In a very short way, Seed and Spark is a crowdfunding and distribution platform. So the crowdfunding side is set up like a wedding registry. You have to list the different things that you need so that your audience starts to understand where all that money is going, and it's not just sort of a chunk of money. And you can have people loan to those specific items as well. So if someone has a location that's going to cost you thousands of dollars and they decide to loan that to you, that can go towards your bottom line. So it's not just about the dollar amount. to get your films made, but what are the things that you need as well. And then if you successfully crowdfund with us and you get 500 followers or supporters on your campaign, you're eligible for distribution on our streaming platform, but also through all of these different output deals. So if you want to be on a cable VOD channel and you would like to control the rights of your film, this is a way that you can do that. We also are doing a few theatrical films as well. So what we're really trying to do is, if you do all of this work to build an audience and raise funds, you should be able to directly distribute to your audience if that is something that you want. And you can do that in conjunction with other distribution deals, things like that. But really, we're trying to give you as many choices as possible in this landscape that is pretty fractured and kind of like the Wild West at this point when getting your films made. This workshop has crowdfunding in the title, but you will hear me talk a lot about distribution, because I am of the mindset if you make something, people should get to see it, and that's actually the hardest thing to have happen. Fundraising is the thing that sort of gives us the most panic, but in the end, it's much more difficult to actually get your stuff watched than made. And also, if you successfully crowdfund and you reach the 500 follower mark, we have a filmmaker gift box we would love to give to you. And this is really rewarding filmmakers who put in the work. And that is film festival waivers to a lot of different film festivals. The most exciting one, I think, is an actual hard drive from G-Tech and something called a Teradek clip, which turns your mobile phone into a monitor on your set, or your iPad, things like that. It sits on the camera. So that's pretty incredible. Basically trying to give you as independent filmmakers tools so that you can do things cheaper and faster and still deliver a beautiful product. There's also film festival, what's the word, sort of advice. There's distribution consultation, there's legal consultation. All of that is sort of wrapped up in this gift box if you get to that 500 follower mark. And lastly, we also publish a magazine called Bright Ideas, and it comes out twice a year. This magazine is really geared towards film audiences. It's not a trade. You're not going to find the next cool lighting setup. But the point of it is that we start to really organize audiences and gather audiences around indie film and not just around each individual film, and that we're really showcasing people who are pushing the limits of film. So it's not full of a bunch of old white men. People whose stories are telling, a different story that's really, we're trying to showcase that. And it's also beautiful. The cover is always a first-time feature director, and we also commission a lot of new work for the magazine, whether that's actually in the print or it's short films or VR pieces and things like that. So from taking this workshop, you get a discount on the subscription, and I highly recommend checking that out. But also, it's just beautiful. So very proud of that one. How many of you have heard of Tug? Look at that. You two in the back. So Tug, just as film lovers and as filmmakers, this is an incredible resource for you. So this is a way that you can screen your films theatrically and actually get paid for them. It's a way that filmmakers they're using it in conjunction with traditional distribution, but if you know that you have an audience in Des Moines and your film is not going to screen there unless you set it up, Tug is a fantastic way of doing that. So basically what it is you decide what theater you would like your film to screen in. Tug makes the relationship with that theater. They say how many tickets they need to sell in order to sort of green light that screening, and then you split the cost of it. You still keep all of the rights. And also, just as people who like to go see films, this is a fantastic resource because it may be the only time you get to see something in a theater. And they also do, revamps of old movies in the 70s. So just check out their website. There are tons of theaters in the city that use Tug screenings, and they're not just sort of the indie houses. They're also like the large multiplexes. So it's a really wonderful resource for you. And lastly, we get to come to these festivals because we have incredible partners. And this is something we'll get into a little bit later as filmmakers. Figuring out who your partners are is really important. So we have the extreme pleasure of getting to work with GTech, Teradek, and Quiver. And these are really incredibly filmmaker-friendly brands that I recommend checking out. GTech is really trying to reach out into the filmmaking community and understand what it is that you need as far as your storage and your hard drives are concerned. Teradek, like I said, they are working on more and more different sort of technical pieces that they can give you that make your lives easier and better. And then Quiver is the company that we are working with on the distribution side. So if you don't crowdfund with us and you still want to distribute, Quiver is how you get onto iTunes, Netflix, Hulu, Vudu, all of those platforms. All right, so this workshop is really designed, and my goal for you as filmmakers is to actually have an independent career. Meaning you get to call your shots, you get to tell the stories that you want to tell, and that you find the financing, you find the distribution. It means that you have to become a bit more like an entrepreneur than just an artiste who gets to sort of make films in the dark and doesn't get to see the rest of the world. So it's breaking out of the shell a little bit of what is it that you are responsible for. And I would like you to be responsible for your audience and for your independence, and to not let anybody else think that they can do that for you or to give that power away. And certainly as women, we're sort of told, like, well, you don't really know how to do that, and someone else will handle that for you. And you can. This is the time in filmmaking where you really get to take the reins if you have the information. So the key to that independence is a direct connection with your audience. If you own that pipeline, if you have that relationship with the people who want to see your work, then you get to actually monetize that, make a living. And this isn't just about the money. In my mind, success is that you get to make your film, and then you get to make your next one, and your next one, and your next one. And that you get to feed yourself, and ideally have a family if that's what you would like to do. So it's not about going viral. It's not about becoming a millionaire, but this certainly wouldn't get in the way of any of those things. But really thinking about who is your audience and how do you get to have that relationship with them. And I know for me, starting out as a filmmaker, I sort of had this belief that other people would know better what my film should do, where it should go, who should watch it. And the truth is, those people just don't exist in the same ways anymore. So the more information that you have, the more direct connection you have with that audience, the more power that you have over your own career. And if you're thinking about crowdfunding, it's already time to start thinking about things like, what do you want to do with this film? So a lot of times we don't think about, a distributor until we're in the festival circuit or we're in the editing room, and then it's like, oh, what are we going to do with this movie? But if you start thinking about, where do you want this film to go, and who do you want to see it when you're making it or before you're making it, that changes a lot of the decisions that you get to make. So how do you want to deliver your film? Do you want to have a theatrical distribution? What happens if you get picked up by a distributor? What happens if you don't? And if you can budget for those things ahead of time, that makes your life a lot easier, and that puts the reins in your hands. So where do you start? It's really basic. And I also should say, I'm sorry, this is available online, this presentation. There's also a handbook version of it. As I'm like, I always forget to say it in the first slide, I'm sorry. So it is good to take notes just to sort of remind yourselves of things, but we will send this to you, and I will send you the handbook version of it. So if you can take in as much as you can. Still taking pictures is a good thing of slides. I appreciate it. So this is really basic. Yeah? Do you have our email address? Not yet. I actually didn't bring my sign-up list. Greg, do you have paper that you could send around? I'm supposed to bring an iPad, and I forgot, and he's the one who... So where do you start? And if you took one picture and you sort of like put this up in your office or wherever it is that you're doing your work, everything should be governed by who is your audience? Who is this film for? How do you find them? Where are they? Online, offline? And how do you get their email addresses? And I'm going to talk a lot about social media in this workshop, but in this case, I really do mean email addresses and not Twitter followers or Facebook likes. Those are incredibly important. But if you sort of think about the purpose of social media, this is your actual audience, all the way down in here in this spiral. And that's people who show up to screenings, that's people who contribute to your crowdfunding campaign, talk about what you're doing, are your supporters, are your audiences for your film. If it's a documentary, those are the people who are in your movie and those support groups that are around whatever it is that you're doing. So that's your core audience. And then if you think like way out here, that's like everybody else. That's all of those like sort of scary they. You hope they show up, that sort of thing. And those people are really hard to reach and sort of figure out if we think about them as this big sort of nebulous group. And the purpose of social media is to bring people from out here in. But the ultimate goal is having a direct connection to them. So an email address, a telephone number, a home address. And I will say that, if you have their email, they want you to have their email. You didn't buy an email list. You didn't buy Twitter followers, those sorts of things, because you want it to be that if you send someone something, they want to open it. They want to know what it is that you're doing, and they elected to be a part of that. So thinking in those terms of, business cards then become incredibly valuable, and getting people to sign up for things that you're doing on, a newsletter is incredibly important. And social media is one way that you're sort of exposing this ether of people to what you're doing. But the ultimate goal is to use it always to funnel down into this core audience. The social media isn't the end goal. And I'll just give a little example of this. We had a film that fundraised with us that had 450,000 likes on Facebook, and it was an anime movie. It had a 15-minute section of anime in it. Really sweet movie, really cool. The anime was done by a really, really famous artist in Japan, and they had built up this following on Facebook, and they were so excited about it, and they were sure that they could raise a whole bunch of money from that audience. And they launched their crowdfunding campaign, and they didn't get a single contribution from anyone from Facebook, not a single one. So we went back to sort of look at what's going on here. These people, they're getting hundreds and thousands of likes on the photos that they post and articles that they post. And it turned out that it was a bunch of teenage girls, mostly, who didn't know that it was about a movie. They just liked the pictures that were being pushed out to them. And they did a really good job of knowing what their audience liked, but they hadn't sort of finished the circle by bringing them all the way in to let them know, this is about a film. You'll really enjoy it. Here's what's happening with this film. Here's this crowdfunding campaign. And you would never expect all 450,000 of those people to convert into contributors, but 5% would be great, something like that, and they got 0. So just thinking in those terms that just being good at Facebook or being good at Twitter is not actually building you an audience for your film. And your audience is not a demographic. So if you think about this, and you say, who's your film for? And most people, I will say, will answer, we're really making a film for everybody. You're like, okay, how do you reach everybody? Where does everybody hang out? What do they do online? Is it just this large group of everyone? And if you start to break it down, so even a demographic, women between the ages of 24 and 35, if you think about those women and their tastes and what they do with their lives, it's very different. They listen to different music, they're on different social media platforms, they get their news from different places, and they definitely watch different movies, and they watch them in different kinds of places. So getting even more specific than this. So the studios and sort of huge budget operations can afford to spend as much on their P&A as they do on their production, and then we call that the spray and pray method, that will hopefully land on enough people that will be interested, but we won't get specific. But as independent filmmakers, we don't have that luxury, and we actually don't need to do it that way. We have to be smarter than that. So can I have a volunteer to give me their log line or a project that they're working on, a very short synopsis? That's all I'm going to ask of you. And I know you're all working on something, so I will call on you. You, my dear. Oh, geez Louise, thanks for coming by. I love it. Yes? Yeah. So a documentary following organ transplants in the U.S.
It's following 3 subjects while waiting.
Ah,
So it's, goes with time. It's literally following them in the process of waiting, what's going to happen, uncertainty, going to hospital, not having an organ, going back. It's huge, highly emotional.
yeah. And one of them is a child, you said.
One of them is a child,
Yeah.
one of them is a woman, middle-aged, and the log line is not certain yet, but we're working on it. It's something around, something with second chance.
Mm.
I'm just treading very carefully because I want to avoid the gift of life,
Yeah.
but it is. So I really would like to do something with second chance.
Great.
Because it's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah.
You will die if you don't go out and have it. You can live.
Right. Who would see that movie or would be interested in knowing more about that movie? Raise your hands. Great. Where do you hang out online?
I guess I'm on Twitter a lot.
Okay.
Tumblr, like a black hole.
Yes. I love when people answer Tumblr. 'Cause I'm like, where do you go on Tumblr?
So many areas in Tumblr that people don't know about. So I don't know. I find that I'm always like, oh, there's like a moms who get quinoa area of Tumblr. Cool. I like quinoa too. So yeah.
Yeah. Are you listening to these answers? Good. Okay. And where do you get your news?
I actually work at CBS News, so I tend to get it because I work. So I don't tend to read the newspaper every day just because I'm around it all the time.
Sure. Do you post stuff a lot on or you didn't mention Facebook, so you don't get a lot of news and stuff from Facebook and things like that.
I tend to post stuff on Facebook a lot. And my friends will share articles a lot, but they tend to not, they'll share Times op-eds, but it's never just a press release or something like that. It'll always be kind of niche blogs or things like that rather than major
Great.
areas. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so my friends will post on Facebook a lot, and they utilize Facebook a lot, but it's not necessarily in the major trades or outlets.
Sure.
And I also went to film school, so they're the kind of people that will go to independent theaters and see films that are in more niche areas that you don't find on Hollywood Reporter
Sure.
or something like that. So it's a good place to find really passionate moviegoers that will kind of seek out your work no matter where you put it.
Yeah. So do you still go to the theater when you go to watch stuff?
Yeah. I live in Queens, and there's a lot of really small independent theaters there, so it's really nice to see a $7 movie instead of coming into the city and paying $15 for IMAX. So
Yeah.
I saw Star Wars in this really tiny Cinemark, and it's
Fun.
beautiful.
And what kind of music do you listen to?
All kinds, really. I don't know. I don't listen to the radio, but I do listen to popular music. I don't actually know how I find it. It's just somehow seeps into my life, and then I'm like, oh, okay,
I like
this
that.
song is fun.
Great. And you said you went to film school, but do you belong to any other organizations besides alumni groups or things like that?
I'm in JHRTS for television, and that's it for now, just because I just graduated, so I haven't joined a lot of organizations yet.
Great, thank you. You had your hand up back there, right? Yeah. What social media platforms are you on?
Oh, Lord. Facebook mostly.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have the Facebook and then everything else on the other side. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where do you get your news?
Facebook.
Yeah?
Mostly. I mean, I watch MSNBC.
Okay.
Mostly Facebook.
And when you click through on something from Facebook, where is it a CNN headline, New York Times, Huffington
A lot
Post?
of Huffington Post,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. A lot of the film stuff I get is Shadow and Act. But mostly
They're
the
great.
main stuff is Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say when you do this interview, you can't do it with all filmmakers because we are a little skewed about where we get our information. You do want to get some normal people who do other things. And what kind of music do you listen to?
I'd say popular, a lot of R&B, hip-hop. Yeah.
Great. And do you read any blogs?
Crunk Feminist Collective. I don't know if anybody else reads that, but
yeah.
it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the main one.
Good. And where do you watch when you watch movies? Like, do you
Where
go to
do I
the
watch
theater
movies?
or?
A lot of independent theaters. Yeah, and Netflix.
Yeah? And when you watch Netflix, do you watch it on your computer or do you stream it to your TV?
Computer. Computer.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Portable.
So do you see how specific that's getting? So when you talk about who is your audience and like what do they like, it's really figuring out some very specific things about them and where you can reach them. So you're already crowdfunding, and this is long before your campaign has started. I wish the word was, crowd ... kind of around the corner funding, because the most important part of that word is crowd. There's no funding crowd. So you have to build a crowd first before you ever start asking them for things. And in order to build that, you have to know things about them. So that interview starts to tell you, what are you saying? So someone who gets their news from CBS is maybe somebody different than someone who gets their news at a Huffington Post. Or if you think about, BuzzFeed versus the Wall Street Journal. That's not a comment on their intelligence or their politics. That's literally what are the things that they click on that interest them and how is that worded? So figuring that out, how do people like to be spoken to? And where are you saying it? So Tumblr is an incredibly valuable resource if you find out that there are people on there, because Tumblr involves video and long form written. It's also a very interactive community in a way that's sort of organized around specific topics. And so people get incredibly engaged around things. So that is a high level of engagement. And so if your film happens to sort of slide into one of those topics that people are already talking about and are already gathered around, that's incredibly valuable to you. Also, who's going to help you amplify that message? If you're asking people in this world of the film that you're trying to figure out who the audience for, and you find out that they're all paying attention to sort of similar people on Twitter, I would add onto that list, who are you following on Twitter? Whose posts are you sort of amplifying that, whose things are you sharing a lot of, that sort of thing. So who are the influencers in this world that you're trying to build? And that can be organizations, that can be individuals. Yeah.
I think the organization point is really important.
Yeah.
The idea that, for example, the film that you're making, I know that there's a real shortage of organs, so reaching out to groups of people who are waiting for organ transplants, reaching out to people who work in that field, who will be really interested in getting a powerful emotional message out there about trying to increase awareness of the need.
Yeah, it's figuring out where are people gathered already and where are the places that you can tap into. And that's just like taking a couple of days and just doing a whole bunch of research. And if you're working on a documentary, you start with the people that you're already working with your subjects. What sort of support groups are they a part of? What are the resources that the hospital offers right now? And sort of building out that group. And I will tell you that is not work that the studios are doing. And it's just something that you can do with your own, sort of your research abilities online. I have a friend who has been working with a large television network, and she was supposed to be working on that show Pretty Little Liars and doing a bunch of promotion for them, for an episode that was coming up. And they handed her a list and they said, this is our top 120 Twitter followers that seem to be posting as much. And she was like, that's what you know about your audience? Like Pretty Little Liars, like one of the most successful television shows on right now. And they were like, yeah, we think these are our super fans. And she spent 2 hours and found out that half of those accounts were not even real. They were just sort of reposting other posts. And then she took a day and did a little bit of digging. And it turns out that there is an entire conference in Canada where like 300,000 people show up for this show. And the network didn't even know that it existed. So it's not that the work is that difficult. It just takes a little bit of time and figuring out where are all of these different people. And then it actually gets to be fun. Like, who is this movie for? And how do you get it to them? Becomes something that is actually really rewarding. And this is, not about pandering to your audience. This is about figuring out, like, what do the people want, and I'll make that. It's, here's the thing I'm making. Who wants to watch this? And where are they? And the better you get at this, the better it will make your film. So especially if you're not done with your documentary right now and you end up finding about all of these other resources and people who have an expertise in this world, they might become subjects in your film, and you have a much broader knowledge than you would have known unless you sort of started doing that digging. And it's similar things that you're going to do anyway when you're thinking about your film and researching for your film. You just need to take it kind of that one step further to who's going to watch it and where are they? Yeah.
Well, it's, oh, sorry, ooh.
They just have to catch you on the screen.
It's okay. I've been in the industry for a while, so it's not that it's like my first, actually no. It's my second independent production, because all of my experience is cable and broadcasting networks, which means I need to do this, phone call, we need 3 crews, done.
Yeah.
Rights, people in a suit.
Yeah.
Can you handle this? So all this research, which actually is quite fun to discover, find out. In my case specifically, because it's a very specific topic this time, I know exactly who it's going to. Actually, these people are dying to help me. What I find interesting is your understatement of you just have to go a little further, because the more I found out, the more chances of funding, basically secured funding. How do you do it? That's like...
Which part of it? Sorry.
Oh my God, I'm going to jump out the window, because it's huge. It's very big. The process.
As far as like finding grants and things like that, what are you?
Everything. Like,
yeah.
I think there's a process of who is it going to, finding out, right? In this case, this is my first project, which is that answer I ever had right in the beginning. Okay.
Sure.
How do you get it there?
Yeah.
How do you get it there, and how do you
So if you know who are the eyeballs that you want to watch this film, the beauty of crowdfunding is it means you get to go directly to those people. It's not about having some other gatekeeper say, okay, we'll let you and then we'll figure out who this film is going to go to. It's showing up to a grant or a distribution company or a festival and saying, we have 1,000 people, and we know where they are. They belong to these kinds of groups. They want to do these kinds of screening, and they've already helped me raise $50,000 for this film. I've proven that there is a market for it, and they are hungry to see it. That is a very different position than being like, I know who this movie's for, but I don't know how to get it to them. It's like, make that relationship with that organization. And if it's a nonprofit, for instance, say they're probably not going to open their donor list to you, but you may say, I would love to do a private screening for your donors, or let's do a fundraising event and you get to screen a portion of the series. And that way you're both working together. But it's making those relationships and seeing those people as an audience that you are going to get to. So it's all of those different people who follow on that blog that you're reading, or those different organizations, and that you then start to have a direct relationship with them, and you say, we're going to do screenings here, here, and here for you, but in order to do that, here's the crowdfunding campaign that I'm running to bring it directly to you. And that doesn't get in the way of you being able to work with other distributors and things like that. Yeah.
What are the mechanics behind it on the site? Are you sort of applying for something through your site and you're posting? Like, could you just give some more detail on the mechanics behind it?
We are a crowdfunding platform on this side. So a lot of what we do is educating, so coming around to places like this and getting you to sort of think in a broader way about crowdfunding and in a broader way about your career. And we also offer a bunch of different educational resources. As far as the crowdfunding platform is concerned, it is that. It is a crowdfunding platform. So you have the money that you want to raise. We do a lot of amplification on your behalf, but we are not going to those grant organizations. We are not reaching out to that blogger on your behalf unless it is someone who's already in our network and we want to make that introduction to you because you think it would be valuable. But the key is that you know who your audience is better than we do. I can ask you a lot of questions, but I am not an expert in organ donor documentary audiences, but I can ask you to a lot of questions to figure out, to help you really guide that way. But as a platform, we don't do that for you. We're really here to empower you to have the tools to really do it for yourself. We don't want to be the gatekeeper that's saying, and now you get to talk to these people, and here are these people. It's really that you're saying, here's where I need to go. Can you help me amplify that message to your networks as well? Does that make sense? Okay. So I touched on this a little bit, but if you're going to work with a partner, whether that's a blogger or an influencer or an organization, figuring out what they need as well is incredibly important. So if you show up to someone and say, to a nonprofit, for instance, and say, I want your audience, can you help me? It's like, they did a lot of work to build that audience and to build that community. So what do you have to offer to them? So similar to what I just said of, I was thinking your audience and the audience I am building are something that I think that would really, work together, and they would be excited about both of the things that we're doing. So how can we work together? I was thinking we could throw an event. Part of it could be a screening for the film, and the other part would be, a couple other things like that. So you show up with a solution to your problem and their problem because you've done a little bit of research. What do they need? Usually it's money, but a lot of times it's exposure or getting the word out there, whether that's, for a documentary film or a narrative feature. We had a film recently that fundraised with us called First Girl I Loved, and one of their partners, it was an LGBTQ themed film, and one of their partners was Out of the Closet, which is a thrift store in Los Angeles. And so one of the incentives that this crowdfunding campaign was able to offer was a 30-minute shopping spree in Out of the Closet. And that was, I think one of the $1,000 levels. So you could go into one of the stores at Out of the Closet for 30 minutes and whatever you could fit in this bag was yours. But they also did a bunch of promotion to their networks as well. And so just thinking about that when you're approaching people that you'd like to work with. If it's a blogger, people who are writing and are posting out in the world constantly need contact. So if you show up and say, I'd love for you to write about us, they're like, yeah. But if you say, here's a posting I think would really interest your audience, here's a video that would go along with it and images, and I noticed that you do these sorts of posts on Thursdays, I thought that this could be a great time to do that. Maybe we could do a series of them. So you show up with a solution rather than a problem. It's a much more effective way of working with partners. And it takes a while. We had a film that fundraised with us that they had the ACLU on board, incredible partner to have. And anytime they wanted to use a tweet or a Facebook post that included the ACLU and that they wanted them to repost, they had to clear it through the legal department 2 weeks ahead of time. So thinking about that when you're working on this timeline, if you're working on a documentary about the environment and you think if you tweet at Greenpeace, that's a partnership, it's not. It takes a lot more work than that, and the rewards are really great when you do put that work in. Okay, so as you're figuring out who these people are that you're trying to talk to, the next big phase is how are you saying it? Sort of what is your professional voice that you're speaking about yourself as a filmmaker, but also about this project that you're working on. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like social media sort of has this potential to suck out your soul a little bit. Yeah. So it's figuring out how does social media work for you as a professional tool. This is like the only time I feel like I'm like an inspirational speaker at like a large, I'm like, how does it work for you? But it's really figuring out what are you saying so that you still feel like a human being, but that you're not giving away all of your life. And if you think about all of those questions I asked you ladies, I didn't ask, are you married? Do you have kids? What's your relationship status? How are you feeling today? I care about those things as a human being, but as a filmmaker, what I care about is what do you like to watch? Where do you watch it? Are you an audience for my movie? So I'm not going to share with you my breakfast or my emotional state of mind. The only reason I would be interested if you had parents or if you had kids was that if I was making a movie that involved kids or that I wanted to sort of tap into parent groups or sporting groups, things like that. That is why that information would be interesting to you. So that's sort of how you preserve your privacy a bit and you figure out what are you saying in your professional and public life that actually moves your career forward? And, have personal accounts for personal things. So this is where tone is really important. What are you saying and how are you saying it? And I would say the most important thing, if you can think about in how your public persona, is don't beg. Please, please, please don't beg. It's not exciting. So if you think just in sort of a crowdfunding example, we get asked for things all the time. If you think about your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed or your email, please do this for us, here's something happening, we need you, do this, go there, and we get sort of turned off to it. So a tweet for a crowdfunding campaign that says, please, please, please help us. We're desperate. It won't happen without you. It's really scary. We're totally broke. Donate here. And you're like, ooh. I'm either going to donate because I want you to be quiet or because I feel guilty. And that is not an audience. The same tweet could be, I'm so excited about this project that I'm working on. The train is leaving the station. We would love to have you join us. Join now with a contribution. Or here's how you can join us with a contribution. That's a very different experience for you of like, oh, is this going to be an exciting thing that I could be a part of? Great. And I think we sort of want to like pull on people's heartstrings a lot of like, you should really do this. It would be, there are, the children with the organs, they don't have them. Like, you should be a part of this. And it's like, ugh. But when you say a second chance at life, that's exciting. That feels hopeful. And it's not that's not, being disingenuous about your film. It's saying like, I'm going to take you on a journey. You're going to learn something and you're going to feel good about it, or at least you're going to feel good right now in being a part of it. And I'm going to show you that I have the ability to do it, to follow through. You can have confidence in my ability to really deliver something to you in the way that I promised. That's just the difference in one tweet. And if you think about that, if you think about not begging and not pleading, then you're not sending 4 and 5 paragraph emails at 3 o'clock in the morning, sort of saying, here's why I'm doing this, and my parents didn't support me, or they did support me, but this is how it's going to, and I didn't do this in film school, and now I want you to be a part of it. And you're like, no, I don't want to know all of that information. I want to know why this is going to be an awesome movie to watch, and why I want to be a part of this and go on this journey with you. Excite me in what you're doing. The next piece is altruism. Especially during your campaign, how can you be supporting other people around you? So this is getting back to, not just sort of living in this culture of scarcity. So $1 for me is not $1 for you, and someone who watches my film, then that means they won't watch yours. And that's just not the truth of how things work. And so if you can look around this room, all of you are probably doing something that is worthy of us talking about. And if you introduced yourselves to one another and just decided that today I'm going to tweet about the projects in this room, you lift the tide, and you expose people to this woman's film who wouldn't necessarily have ever gotten to know about it. And we start to grow the audience for independent film rather than just sort of these tiny pockets around each film. And so a very small example of that was two women that were fundraising at the same time on Seed and Spark. I don't know if you can quite read it up there, but one was in LA, one was in New York. They didn't know each other. Their only connection was they happened to be fundraising at the same time. And Nia on Vacation wrote, "So much great independent film to support on @Seed and Spark. In honor of film is almost at their goal. Make it happen here." Didn't know each other. In honor of film was just about to be successful. And so Nia on Vacation sort of exposed her film. We retweeted it a whole bunch as the platform. In honor of film clearly retweeted it. They were very excited. And then when they were wildly successful, a couple days later, they turned back around and started supporting In honor of film and posting about them. That doesn't cost them anything. They liked the look of the project. They had nothing to do with one another. One was like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the other was about honor killings. So like there's no connection as far as the theme. But it's just about supporting other people whose projects you think are interesting. Another piece is the authenticity. So the point of social media and the point of your public persona is that you're reaching people, and that in order to do that, you have to consistently be active. And if you don't like the way that you're posting, or you don't like yourself, if you are not a smiley face, exclamation pointy, hearts and roses sort of person, that can't be your social media persona, because you'll hate yourself while you're doing it, and then you won't do it. So figuring out what is your authentic voice when you're speaking publicly and professionally, and then utilizing that. It takes time. And that's where message testing comes into play. Figuring out, if you're working on your log line, sending out to 10 people that you trust. Here are the 3 different log lines I'm working on. What do you feel when you see these? And then you start to take that, maybe it's your pitch video, or it's your poster, or things like that you're testing it out in a trusted community. And then you take that to Twitter or to Facebook, and you start to see, What gets retweeted? What gets liked on Facebook? What are the comments that you get back in your email when you're sending these things out to people? What gets shared? Okay, so then you start to see, okay, I want to do more of that, less of that, sort of need to retweak this. This is all long before your campaign starts. This is about just figuring out how are you talking about what you're doing and who's paying attention. And it takes time. Yeah.
I just wanted to provide a really great example that a filmmaker came to my school, Justin Simeon from Dear White People.
Yes.
And years before, while he was still writing the film, he started creating the Dear White People Twitter account as just a way to test the message of this imaginary radio show in the film, and then that went viral. And then that helped him with his crowdfunding campaign.
Yep.
It was largely a crowdfunded film. And then I forget where the rest of their funding came from. It was like oil.
They crowdfunded to do a teaser for investors.
Yeah.
So I give Justin as an example a lot because he's incredible. If you want to look at a couple different filmmakers who have done this, Dear White People is an incredible example. Also, I Believe in Unicorns, Leah Meyerhoff, who I know is here. The way that they built their audience and then were able to sort of utilize that in their crowdfunding campaign, in their festival run, and then in their distribution campaigns, and then getting to work on the next thing. So Justin was hired by his distribution company to run his distribution campaign, and then got hired to write a book about the movie as well. So he started that as a Twitter handle, figuring out the voice of his lead characters and sort of the tone of his film on Twitter. What got reposted? What did people interact with? How could he create these relationships? It started that small. And that's a 3-year journey that he took with that film. But his life from when he started Dear White People to now, wildly different. And that's what it is to think about your whole career. So all of this is that, one of the main reasons that you're not going to be pleading people, that you're going to be sharing all of this information about other people working, that you are a source of momentum. You are the thing that drives the momentum of your career, nobody else. And so it is your job at every step of the way to make us feel that your success is inevitable. The success of this project is inevitable. The train is leaving the station, whether you're on it or not. We'd love for you to join us. It's happening. So it's a much more psychological experience than we think about originally, that people want to be a part of a winning team. They want to join something that makes them feel good about themselves, and that is up to you to really keep that momentum going in everything that you do. That's why begging tweets don't get you very far. Okay, so we're going to get into sort of the nitty-gritty of crowdfunding and actually figuring out, what do you need? And how does this work when you're prepping for a campaign? How much is usually the first question that I get. So on Seed and Spark, we are a curated platform on the crowdfunding side, which means we give feedback to every single project that comes through the site. And this is a huge question that I get. What's the magic number? How much can I actually raise? What's the average raise? Those sorts of things. And just for you to know, on Seed and Spark, the average raise is $20,000. On other platforms, it's less than $10,000. So just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about how much people actually raise on crowdfunding campaigns on average. But most importantly, what do you need? Not just what do you want, but what do you need to make this thing happen? And if you decide that that's $50,000 or $100,000, then your question is, how big is your network right now? How many direct email addresses do you have? What is your engagement like on your social media platforms? What partners are involved? And is that actually feasible, that you could raise $100,000 from those people? I don't know that for each one of you. It totally depends on where you are. But it's why the whole first half of this workshop is about figuring out who is this for and building that crowd, so that when you get to this point, you're in a very different position than the position you are right now. So I also will say that it is incredibly important to figure out how much you need and not just what you want, because if you need $50,000 to make the thing that you say you're going to make and you don't end up raising that money, you're not going to make the thing that you said you were going to make. So raising enough to actually deliver on your promises is crucial. And this is important that, crowdfunding is not a right, it's a privilege, and it will go away if we don't respect that. So if you decide okay, whatever, I didn't get there, or I'm just going to take this money and do something else with it, you've then burned all of those people who contributed to your crowdfunding campaign. And you haven't just burned them for you, you've burned them for me. That becomes something that, contributing to films is not something that audiences will want to do if you don't actually deliver enough, or if you don't actually raise enough to deliver on your promise. If you need $50,000 but you don't have that in your network, raise it in stages. We built our platform specifically for this so that you can raise money at different stages in your production. We had a wonderful filmmaker who graduated from NYU and was making his thesis film. It was going to cost him $50,000, which we were like, a student film, $50,000. He's like, I know, nobody knows about me. I'm not going to be able to do that in one go. So he raised $9,000 as a pre-production campaign. And he spent the money on a casting director, casting space. He threw an event to show his past work. And he also raised money for sort of marketing materials. And then he came back and was very clear that this was just for pre-production. And then he came back and was able to raise $30,000 for his production campaign. But there was about 2 or 3 months in between those campaigns in which he was doing lots of audience building events, getting people who were going to be involved talking about what he was doing, posting about it, because you have the crowdfunding campaign and you're able to post updates to people, and that goes directly to them into their email box. So he raised $33,000 in 30 days, and then came back 6 months later and raised another $12,000 for post and distribution. So in the end, he raised over $50,000. He just took a year to do it, and he got to make the exact film that he wanted to make. And now he has 3,000 people that know about his film because he built this audience over a year. And people are now asking about the feature. So using your campaigns and your films strategically and really thinking about the long run. It's a lot that goes into how much should I raise? And then incentives. If you've gone to the trouble of figuring out who these living, breathing human beings are, give them stuff that they actually want. And that's probably not a t-shirt or a mug, maybe a hoodie. I'm still a big fan of hoodies. But that's not our industry. We are filmmakers. So what can you do that involves people further in the project that you're making? Is that inviting them to set? Is that an extra role? Is that inviting them to a premiere party or a post, a wrap party? Is it specialty screenings, backers-only screenings, things like that? Or who in your community can you tap into, or what partners can you tap into to offer exciting incentives? But what can you do that you don't have to manufacture? And something that happened, when Kickstarter first launched, a bunch of the initial projects realized that they got done with the campaign and they had to spend about 30% or 40% of their budget that they'd raised on the incentives that they'd promised and a whole bunch of time. And that's a distraction. So what are the things that you can do that further the film that you're making and deepen people's experience in it? And also, one thing that's incredibly important is figuring out how you're going to get this film to these people. So at some incentive level, you should offer the film. That's the ultimate reason why people are going to contribute to a campaign. How are they going to see it? Is that an expiring link? Is that a digital download? Figuring those things out for yourself. DVDs cost something to make, things like that. And the other thing is, just to put a star in your notes, the $25 incentive. So $25 to $100 is an important range. $100 is the average contribution amount. $25 is the most common contribution amount. So this is from a film that fundraised with us called Time Signature, and it was a time-traveling short. And Sean Mannion, our lovely Sean, during the first week of his campaign, so it was a first week only thing to help drive momentum in what he was doing, he said, for $15, contribute to the campaign and then tell me where you would like to go in history. And so Emily Best, our CEO, and my dear friend, wrote back the signing of the Magna Carta. And within 10 minutes, this was on her Twitter feed. We found at Emily Best at the signing of the Magna Carta, when will we find you? #TimeSignature and the link to his campaign. And if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see Emily Best peeking over the Friar's shoulders. She happens to have the same haircut. And she thought this was hysterical. Emily has 6,000 followers on Twitter. She has, 2,000 friends on Facebook. So when she posted this, people thought it was funny, and she posted it a whole bunch. And so I actually think it was a $25 contribution. People who didn't know about the film, they just wanted one of these. They thought it was funny. And in that day, 10 other people contributed because of Emily's posts. And he turned a $25 contribution into a couple $100 contribution. And so kind of putting that in your head of something that's personal, visual, and shareable, and instant. And another thing that he then had a gallery of these throughout his campaign that he could share and show, and it was funny, and it was in the theme of his film, and it was able to be used as more promotion for what he was doing, and other people were doing it on his behalf. So being strategic about that, and it's also just fun. Doing something that sort of makes you smile and keeps you excited. Crowdfunding can be, I'm sure if any of you have crowdfunded or have had friends that done it, they'll tell you it's the hardest thing that they've ever done, and it feels bad sometimes. So figuring out how can you be prepared with fun things to do, not begging people for money, but asking them to join you on a journey. What are the things that can really make this an interesting and exciting and fun thing for you? Okay, the pitch video. A memo must have gone out at some point that sort of obliterates everything anyone ever learned in film school when it comes to pitch videos. Because the majority of videos that I see are like a lovely young man, and he's sitting, like under a bridge, always a bridge. Like they film in Dumbo for some reason. I'm like, the train goes by every 15 seconds. And he's sitting there and he's like, hi, I'm Joe, and I'm working on an action thriller. And you're like, really, Joe? I can't hear you because the train's running over the head. And anyone who was interested in an action thriller didn't pay attention after the opening second. So your job as filmmakers in your pitch video is to make something that is fantastic and shows your filmmaking abilities. Your little film has to be representative of your giant film. So this is where you show your filmmaking abilities. If your film is supposed to be a comedy, we have to laugh at some point in the pitch video. We have to feel something. So ideally, it's your video opens with something from the world of your film. And if you haven't shot it yet, which I know that is often a concern, do some sort of test footage. Show us why we should get involved. Show us, don't tell us. And don't put your cinematographer on film unless they're like super well-spoken to talk about how they're gonna shoot it. Show why you hired them as your cinematographer. And you only have about 90 minutes, or 90 seconds, 90 minutes. Can you imagine a 90-minute pitch video? You only have about 90 seconds to do it. People stop paying attention. And you should appear in it. It shouldn't be all you. We won't care about who's making it until we care about the film itself. So that's why we need to feel something in the opening of that film. There's a wonderful film that fundraised with us called Rez, and he did an incredible job on his pitch video, and then therefore on his campaign. And he really went back to a lot of his message testing and knowing who his audience was. And it's a film that takes place on the Leech Lake Reservation in Minnesota. And the filmmaker is an African-American man from Harvard, and he had a good friend in school who had grown up on this reservation. And they had sort of a connection over telling different kinds of stories that weren't getting told. And so they committed to each other that they were going to tell a story about the Leech Lake Reservation and what was happening with these teenage boys especially, because it's just not a story that we know about, and the gang violence that happens on these reservations. And so they were getting ready to shoot this movie, and his friend went home for Christmas break and was shot in a gang-related incident. And so after Dominic graduated, he still decided to make this movie. So this is the story that he opens his pitch video with. So you're immediately like, okay, I'm in. I want to know about this. And he shows the news footage from when his friend was shot. And then he had shot a lot of the film, so he was able to sort of show us throughout the pitch video what it looked like, some behind-the-scenes stuff. And then halfway through the video, this song starts to rise up. And it's this hip hop song, and the lyrics don't start yet, but by the end of it, you're feeling a lot of emotions with this song. And I watched that video and was like, that's great, that was super powerful. When that video went on YouTube, all of the teenage boys that he had known and worked with on the Leech Lake reservations knew exactly what that song was. It was the thing that they had been playing and sending to each other on different mixtapes. And so all of the comments on his YouTube page were, what is that song? That's from this band. No, that's what they're playing here. No, I had them here. Send it to, watch this, do this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of comments because of that one song. Because this movie was for those boys. And he made it for them, and he knew them because he'd been living with them and knew what they liked and knew what would speak to them. And he was able to, he overfunded 3 different times on one campaign. And part of his messaging was, for every $2,000 more that we raise, we get to take this movie to another reservation and screen it. So that was incredibly powerful for these boys, saying, like, we met this guy, he's amazing, you want this to come to where you are. So that's a small thing that he did. But just that choice of that song said that he was like, I know you, and I'm giving this is for you. And they responded to that. And it meant that he got to 3x his goal and got to take his film in a lot more places than he originally thought. And then PBS saw that, was really interested in the audience engagement in his film, picked it up for distribution, and he's now working on the feature. So this is another kid coming straight out of film school who did it in a really, really smart way. Okay, so organization for your campaign. You've figured out who you're reaching out to. You've figured out how you're talking. The next piece is organizing all of that. This should feel like pre-production for your film. Pre-production for your campaign is intense, and the more you do of it, the way more fun you will have and the more successful you will be. So getting really clear, who are all of the people you are reaching out to? Partners, direct email addresses, audience groups that you've built. Who are all of those people, and what are you saying to them and when? So something to think about is that first 30% of your campaign is crucial. And getting to that 30% really shows that momentum. So who are the people that you're reaching out to ahead of time to say, can I count on you in the first 2 days? And for how much? And if you think about that, if you show up to a campaign that's running for 2 weeks and it's 5% funded, that doesn't give you very much confidence that this thing is interesting, exciting, or that the people closest to it know that this is going to be a successful venture, or that maybe the filmmaker is a fraud, those sorts of things. So, but if you show up a day in and it's 50% funded, you're immediately more interested in something that's going on. So that's work that you have to do ahead of time to organize that 30%. And what direct messages are you sending out on Facebook and Twitter? How are you organizing your partnerships? So saying, with the ACLU, for instance, I'm going to give you these 4 videos for the first week. These are the sorts of tweets that we're going to be tweeting out. Here's the blog post for this specific article. And having that all scheduled ahead of time will make your life so much better. And figuring out updates. So those are things that you're doing throughout the campaign, but if you have them created ahead of time, it's a much smarter way of going about it. And you can create update videos while you're making your pitch video. So a little, a glimpse into something that you couldn't really cover in your pitch video, things like that. But it's also where you're going to be telling people how exciting this is and how well it's going, and updates and things like that, which goes back to that slide of you are in charge of the momentum. So what are the materials that you're sending out to support that momentum? And then your social media. So planning your tweets, planning your Facebook posts a week in advance, knowing when things are going out. If you're using Twitter a lot, scheduling them on a program like Hootsuite. Facebook has a scheduler that you can use. So the goal is not to have you just glued to your computer for 30 days, but really being more strategic than that. This is another one of these, Sean Mannion, and if you look over JFK's shoulder, there's our operations czar, and it just says, get yours here. So it's the fictitious meeting already of Forrest Gump and JFK, and then our lovely Max in the background. And then what else can you do during the campaign that would actually make it fun? Like, this isn't supposed to be drudgery work. This is supposed to be about reaching directly to your audience and creating a relationship with them. So what can you do? Can you have events? Something that I would put another big star in your notes is a matching contributor. So as New York City residents, I'm sure you've heard WNYC when they have their fundraising drives, and it's like this week only or today only, your money is worth twice as much because we have a matching donor. That's when I contribute because I also get the New Yorker subscription. So it's sort of coming up with things like that. And that can just be as simple as you know someone's going to give $1,000 to your campaign, and you say, great, can you do that on the second Friday of my campaign? And I will run a matching contribution drive up till then, where it's your money this week is worth twice as much, that sort of thing. Every single person who has utilized that on Seed and Spark has been successful with their campaign. It is an incredibly useful tool to you, and it's something else to be talking about. Short-term incentives, we talked a little bit about that. And one thing I will say for the social media and figuring out how much you should be posting and what you should be posting, just to backtrack a little bit, if you're only talking about yourself, if you're only talking about your campaign, even if you're doing a really good job of being positive about it, people will get tired of it. In the same way, when you're building up your social media network, if the only thing you're talking about is yourself, people will stop paying attention. So if you think about a good ratio is 9 to 1. For every one time that you ask for something, you need to offer 9 things. And that could be a video, that could be an article, that could be someone else's project. But really thinking about your social media as a world that you are creating, in which your film is a logical part. So a good example of this is a film called Seclusion that fundraised with us. And it was about a one-way trip to Mars, female astronaut. And she was like, what am I going to talk about in my social media? This woman is alone, and then she's going to be alone some more. And then she's not coming back. And, I'm just like, okay, not a lot to work with. And then she was like, no, I'm going to turn this into everything about space travel and women in space and the history of NASA and the history of international space travel. And then my film is something that fits into that world. And it gave her a lot more things to be posting about, but it was research she was doing anyway for her film. So taking that research and making it public. Does that make sense? Because that is a really key thing to your social media world, and it will make your life more interesting. And that's another one of those things where you start to see, like, what are people paying attention to? Okay, so they really like these sorts of stories about space. So I'll do more research on that. And you have, 50 years worth of materials to be drawing on there. So thinking about that, and during your campaign, it's the same thing of like you can't just be posting about how you need money and what you need, but really about what are you still doing to get people excited. This is an example of a really fun update. So this was a campaign called If There's a Hell Below, and it was a time-traveling feature that was just at South by Southwest. And Nathan did a wonderful job. He had worked on an Obama campaign on like sort of the grassroots level, so he understood the sort of like audience building and how you talk to people. And one of the things you do is you tell people how well it's going. And so every couple of days he would send out a graph with, here's our target and here's what we're actually doing. We're beating our targets. And that trajectory is like not a very common one in crowdfunding, which is just sort of like the steady tick up. Generally in crowdfunding there's a big spike in the beginning, and then it plateaus out in this very scary way, and then spikes again at the end. Nathan did an incredible job where he was updating people pretty consistently, but also offering fun things. And he did a really fun thing. Which was called the Funder Games, and it was he picked 3 different cities. Right when the first Hunger Games movie was coming out. He picked 3 different cities that had to compete for his premiere. And so for one whole week, he focused all of his outreach on those 3 cities. And they got like team mascots, and he had different people in each one of those cities that were sort of the hosts of it. And that was something he did in the middle week when normally it's just sort of this scary plateau. But things like that, sort of fun things that you can do. Does that sound like a lot of work? Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work. And anyone who tells you it isn't is lying to you. And anyone who says that they can do it for you and you won't have to do a thing is also lying to you. So I do recommend, if you're raising a whole bunch of money, that you have a crowdfunding consultant sort of above and beyond what we give you, just to have someone that's their sole focus and who's really good at it. But that's like when you're raising like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even 70 or 100. But no matter what, you're going to have to be a part of it. And you can't do it alone. So when you are hiring your crew, when you're hiring producers, it's thinking about the audience building as part of that. So who are the people that you want to surround yourself who get that we all need an audience? You will have your DP say, well, I don't know anybody and I don't like to talk to people. And you're like, well, you went to film school. I hope, because that's why I'm hiring you, or maybe not, but you're good at what you've done, and I know that because you've worked on a bunch of movies, so I know that you know people. And a DP needs their movie to be seen just as much as the rest of us. So figuring out who can you surround yourself so that you're not alone doing this. You need a team. And you need to put all of that organization into a schedule. And if you're working with a team, how many of you are freelancers? Yeah. So what happens when you're running your crowdfunding campaign where you're supposed to be super active and consistently attentive and you get a job that's shooting where you have no reception for a week? Your campaign grinds to a silent halt. But if you're working with someone and you have your producer or your director, whoever it is that's working with you, and you say, great, I'm going to be gone, here's the schedule. These tweets need to go out on this day. We're sending out these emails. This video goes to this partner on that day. This is how it gets posted. Then your campaign continues on. So it's figuring out how can you do this in a sustainable way as a creative professional. So you want to put all of it into your schedule and then leave room for new elements that you'll be surprised during your campaign, things that come up. And if you actually have made a plan, you can add those into that plan rather than just sort of like running behind this campaign trying to catch up to it. And this is what a schedule could look like. It's a little blurry from the back, or very blurry. But this is just an example of 3 weeks. This is kind of like an outline. So if you have people who like to do spreadsheets and calendars, bring them into your fold. So this was something that, it's the first week. The topic of this week is, the launch date. And then here are the updates that are going out this week. Here are the Twitter posts, Facebook posts. Here are my direct emails. If I have a newsletter, my thank yous, the different videos and images that I'm using for those different posts. This will make your life beautiful and wonderful if you put something like this together. And doing that for all 4 weeks of the campaign is really helpful. I recommend doing like a week of it or 2 weeks ahead of time and sort of having a general idea for the last weeks, but things will come up and you'll want to not just stick to a failing plan. If things aren't working, you want to make adjustments. And so part of that is reviewing every single day what's working, what's not working, and taking that feedback. Something else that I love when people do this is I think it's so smart. If you did that initial interview that I did, what social media platforms are you on, do that with the people who've already contributed. Find out more about them. These are not hypothetical people who are interested in what you're doing. They've opened their wallets already. So where are they on social media? How did they hear about the campaign? Where do they want to watch it when it's done? And also, the point of that is, where do you find more people like that? And what can you give them to make them amplifiers? That is really what your updates and your communication with people who've contributed to your campaign, that's your goal, is to turn them into amplifiers for what you're doing. And then also asking people who haven't contributed, here's the thing I'm working on, I'd love for you to take a look. And they'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't see that. And you thought, oh, I thought I would have gotten that person on Facebook. Maybe I need to look at all of the people that I'm messaging and what I'm saying. It might also be that they say, I don't have any money. And you're like, that's fine. Because if you're thinking about these people as audience members rather than just dollar amounts, someone who contributes $5 to your campaign and tells 5 people about it is incredibly valuable to you if your goal is getting your movie made. So it's responding back to them and saying, like, that's totally fine. Would you mind sharing it with your community if this is something that you find interesting? That is really valuable to me. I love it when filmmakers do like $1 Fridays or $5 Fridays, where their goal is not to reach $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 in a day, but to reach 500 people who give $1, or to reach 50 people who give $1, and really letting people know that whatever they can contribute, that they can join in your journey, is really, really important. Yeah.
So I do a lot of consulting for freelance.
Oh, thank you.
I work in finance during the day, and then I have, I guess, an alternative personality in the evening where I do
We
a lot of
like
cultural
people
stuff.
like you.
and you know, I've done consulting a little bit on the side just because I've worked with a lot of organizations or that I've been trying to start up as an artist. And now it's kind of like I'm trying to do more with arts. I try to separate myself with that. When any time when a film person or artist knows that I have this background, then they start asking me these questions.
Yeah.
Like, can you help me with this? So here I am. But one of the things that I wanted to actually ask, because I'm trying to figure out a way to manage it, is that incentivize people sharing and you know, and giving. So, you know, if they give a certain amount and they get maybe 10 people to give, and they are responsible, and those people say, oh, this person, per this person, how can I build that into the whole
Yeah, so I recommend doing like a during the campaign to send out like a survey. So when you say thank you to someone, you say like, where did you hear about this? And then they tell you like, oh, so-and-so recommended it to me. Or you can ask them that on Twitter when you say thank you, however it is that you're thanking people. And then in your promotion, you can say, just, you know, through your, however you're promoting it or doing your outreach, whether that's through emails or social media, and say, you know, if you recommend 10 people, here's an extra prize for you. That sort of thing. So that would mostly be through just your promotion of it.
But that wouldn't be put inside the incentives list at all.
You could.
To market it, because I think upon seeing it for the first time, that might incentivize certain people to do certain things. If the incentive is high enough, they may actually get one of the $1,000 prize gifts.
Yeah, you could totally customize that. So at the, you know, if you contribute $25, you get this incentive. But if you also get 10 people to share, that makes you eligible for the $1,000 prize. Things like that. So you can do fun things like that. Yeah.
So, should I wait for a microphone or just?
Oh yeah, I think they would love you to have a microphone.
Where are you at? I'm right here.
So I wanted to talk about a different kind of a project and just get some insights from you.
There's going to be Q&A at the end, so I feel like that might be a better time, to just because there's a few more slides and I want to make sure we get through all of it, unless this is like short.
I think it's short.
Okay, cool.
We're running a film contest, so a very different kind of approach, and we haven't done crowdfunding because we've been putting all our energy into every other kind of social media and connections. And I'm just wondering if you have any experience in those sorts of things, and if you have
so explain a little bit about what the film contest is.
So we're looking for, because I want to keep this short. In 1 month, we're asking teams of filmmakers to make films about women with a woman as a central character, and at least one of the lead creative people has to be a woman. And we've actually gotten a ton of sponsors already. So it's almost like we have this lot of money and product prizes, but we want to get to filmmakers all over the world, and it's really a challenge. So it's sort of like, can crowdfunding be shifted into a great vehicle for outreach that is not working in other ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a way to think about crowdfunding that is my favorite way to do it. So like, yes, you need the funds. That is a thing that like we all need money. But if you think about it in terms of marketing, that it's a way that you're actually making money while marketing your film. And so in your case, I've worked with a number of different things that are similar. So we had a collective where they were doing, it was called 13, and they were doing 13 shorts by 13 different women. And they were fundraising. They didn't have all of the women on board yet, but they had a couple of them. And I'll give you my card, I can send you that campaign to sort of see the promotion that they did. Other people have done it. Tangerine recently fundraised with us where they only raised, I think, $12,000, but the point was it was going to be $1,000 for each, I think they had 10 filmmakers, and it was going to go to each one of those. And so they really used the campaign as a way of promoting that and saying to people, which I thought was really powerful, of saying, we're wanting to highlight these voices and work as curators to get these voices out there. And it was an opportunity for the industry then, and the community to help support that. So here's a direct way that you can support getting these kind of films made. And here's why we are the people to be that curator and that facilitator. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so during your campaign, just to sort of run through things, you're continuing to message test, you're doing research, you're going to things in real life and meeting people. I know, crazy. Like festivals, and using your thank yous as more promotion for what you're doing. So those time traveling things that I was showing you, that was a thank you that worked as more promotion. Supporting other people, and then thinking about what are some other creative ways of doing outreach. So I mentioned Nathan Williams on If There's a Hell Below and his funder games, but he also did something that was really effective where he wanted to partner with this organization called Real Girls, and they teach filmmaking to girls 8 to 18, mostly on the West Coast. And they always need stuff. And so he said, if my hard drive line gets fulfilled on my wish list, when we're done with this film and it's over, I will erase the film off of these drives and obviously have 3 backups someplace else, and I will send hard drives to Real Girls. And this is my way of supporting this organization. And so Real Girls started promoting the campaign through teaching this workshop and telling this story while he was fundraising. Someone from a major publication wanted to know more about it, did a feature on If There's a Hell Below and Real Girls, and now that the film is done and on the festival circuit, they still have that promotional partner. So that was one very small thing that Nathan did, again, that got him a partner who, like, Real Girls aren't necessarily the audience for an NSA thriller, but maybe they are. Another really fun one was a short that fundraised with us called Sheila Scorned, and it was a feminist grindhouse thriller. And yeah, exactly. And Mara, the director, decided, where are there more women who are interested in empowering other women? Like, where are these kick-ass women? And so she went to one of the roller derby associations in Los Angeles. And they are always looking for more people to come to the roller derby events. And so they set up, it was a double header. The B and C teams were going to play each other, and they threw a big event. And they had temporary face tattoos, and they had a step and repeat, and they had drink specials. And a portion of the tickets to the derby went towards the campaign. And by promoting it to their film network and to Mara's personal network, she got a bunch of people to show up to this really fun event. They'd never been to the Derby before, and they started growing these audiences together. So what are things like that you can do that further your audience, and also is just a nice thing and a fun thing to do while you're campaigning? And one other thing that she did, which was incredibly smart, is that she decided she was going to take a week and figure out if she could get her camera line donated by a camera house or by a brand. And she ended up doing a lot of very personal and targeted research at different companies, got her whole camera donated to the campaign, and got a lens package. So I think her camera package was like $8,000 that she was asking for, and she got something that was worth about $15,000. And then she got to do a whole bunch of promotion for that brand because she was really targeted in her outreach. So thinking about that kind of stuff during your campaign can be really effective. Okay, your campaign is done. It was wildly successful. You're not done yet. You have just built such an incredible muscle. And that muscle is knowing who your audience is, how you're talking to them, building up a feed of continuing to stay in contact with them. You're going to need materials to keep doing that. You're going to keep growing this audience after your campaign because now you're just rock stars at it. So put together an EPK. Behind the scenes footage. If you're ever going to work with a distributor, you're going to need this. If you're going to be if you're going to be continuing to promote your film, you're going to need all of this stuff. And just having a little bit of foresight about it is great. Stills. If you go through the trouble of actually making this beautiful movie exactly the way that you want to make it, capture that with behind the scenes, but also with still photos. They're not going to go back. You're not going to go back and make art for your poster. You need to capture it while you're making your film. And so don't be that producer or that director who's emailing your crew afterwards being like, hey, can you send us your iPhone photos from set? We need it for behind the scenes. Bring someone to set to do that. And also incentive fulfillment. If you have people coming to set that was part of their incentive, take pictures of that. Show people how exciting it was to be on the journey of your film and how you rewarded people. And the point of all of this is that you need to continue to grow this audience, because if we're actually going to have sustainable careers as filmmakers, it's not going to happen after the first campaign. So these concentric circles, it says this is an example of a campaign and the audience that you build. So it starts with the filmmaking team and then your friends and family. And in order to run a campaign that isn't just friends and family funded, you have to do all of that work of figuring out who the audience is beyond your friends and family. And then so maybe that's social interest groups and organizations and schools. And then on the outside of that sits your social media network and then your festival circuit. And through all of those rings, you're talking to all of those people. And maybe not after the first campaign or the second campaign, but if you do your work, you're not starting in at the beginning of that circle every time. You're building it further and further out. So 3 or 4 campaigns out, and you are speaking directly to the people who want to watch your films and they are funding them, that becomes sustainable. And I will just put a little note in your head about festivals, that if we can start to shift the way we think about the success of a film, and the trajectory of what our film life is, I think a lot of us sort of still have this view that I make the film, I submit it to Sundance, it gets into Sundance, it gets bought by a distributor, and then I don't have to worry about money ever again. And that is a really nice little dream that happens for 0.01% of the people who submit to Sundance, and usually those are white men. And even then, that's not happening as much anymore. So we give the example of Justin Simien. He got into Sundance. He was a darling of Sundance. That film didn't get bought until 3 or 4 months after the festival. So it's just, to me, that is not a sustainable mark for success. Thank you. But if you think about your festival circuit as a way to build an audience further, and if you think about this, that if you come to a festival like Athena, and the people who come to watch the films here are really invested in films, they figured out this sort of smaller festival that really programs to their taste, those are the people you're trying to reach if this is where your film got in. And you can talk directly to your audience at small festivals. And if you have the luck of getting to do a Q&A at a smaller regional festival, that is gold. Those people bought a pass to that festival. They are most likely the people who in their community are the movie recommendation. They are the Fandango of their community. And so they bought a pass, they came to your screening, and then they stayed afterwards to hear you talk about it. They are interested. So use that opportunity to really, if you can blow a great Q&A, you can blow a great movie with a bad Q&A. Just, I don't know, I made the movie and I don't really want to talk about it anymore. And you're like, oh no, I don't like you anymore, and I don't like your film, and I don't want to talk about it. But if you really use that as the campaign trail, where you are shaking hands and kissing babies and wanting to find out about people and getting their email addresses, that becomes a really valuable experience for you. And then it's not just about going around on the festival circuit hoping to get your film bought so you don't have to worry about anything anymore. It's a different sort of success metric if you're actually focusing on who is your audience and how can you know the most about them. And then the last thing is join a broader community. There are so many different resources for you online. We like to provide as much as possible for you. We also have a Twitter chat that we run twice a month called Film Curious, and it's a place where filmmakers come together. They tell us the sort of themes that they would like us to be talking about and experts they would like to have us bring in, and then it becomes a community. And it was just something we started so we could talk to filmmakers about what are the challenges of indie film right now? And it's now thousands and thousands of filmmakers who are now collaborating, meeting each other, trading expertise, and there are tons of things like that. So joining those organizations, using these film festivals, there are so many different ways of really being able to be connected and tap in as a support for you as you're doing this. And so many more filmmakers are starting to think along these terms. So I really recommend having as many of those as possible. And lastly, it's always going to be your job to get butts in seats. This is usually where I talk about Justin Simeon, who from the very beginning, from his Twitter campaign to his crowdfunding campaign to getting hired by his distributor, it was his job to get people to see his movie because he was the best at it. If you do all of this work, you are the best one to get people to watch your film and to talk about it. And that's it. I think we only have just a few minutes for questions, but if you have any, please. Yeah. Can you send around an email? Great. And I will send you this presentation and discounts to the magazine and all of that. Yeah. Yes.
Hi. I just produced my first short film last month.
Congratulations.
And thank you. I hadn't started doing any sort of publicity because we hadn't figured out the name for the film or for the production company, me and my producing partner. And so I was wondering, like, in Twitter or Instagram or whatever, should I be using like a Twitter handle that's about my production company or about the film name?
This is a very good question. So when it comes to creating your accounts, especially for a short film, if you think about your social media accounts, starting them for things that are going to be around for a while. So if you build this huge audience around a short film based on your Twitter handle, then that's going to die after, 6 months or a year. I usually recommend people use hashtags on Twitter for short films and have it, if you have a production company, which it sounds like you do, building an audience around that so that people start to really know the kind of films you're interested in making and the sort of, and not that you have to stick to a specific, genre or anything like that, but hashtags are pretty effective in that way. Facebook works differently. It's sort of up to you. In sort of how you want to build that audience. It depends. If you're starting from scratch, it's really, the world is your oyster, but you also, it depends on what your timing is. I think if you've already made your short film, I would have a Facebook page that was for the larger, the larger production company. But it's much easier to get people interested in an actual film than a company. So keeping those things in mind. Yeah.
Can people hear me? So I had a note just because of the social media, specifically with Twitter, because they just changed their algorithm. And I didn't realize this until after I did my first crowdfunding campaign, but kind of researching the algorithms of all the social media platforms makes it really helpful when you're building your audience, because you can have thousands of followers, but they're not going to see your posts. I think there was a thing a few weeks ago where B.O.B., his followers thought that he didn't exist. They thought that he deleted his account because they hadn't been seeing his tweets for months. So I just wanted for people that didn't know that, because it's really helpful. And my question is, for Seed and Spark, I know you primarily deal in independent film, but do you think the platform would lend itself just as well to independent television or web series?
We do those as well. So it's really anything that's a moving picture or in service of that. So film festivals have raised funds with us. A book that was about film festivals, they raised money with us. So anything that's sort of in service of that. But web series are incredibly popular. And just to piggyback on your first point, that's a part of being an entrepreneur. So if your tools are Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Tumblr and MailChimp if you're doing newsletters and things like that, understanding how those work is important. So something that recently happened with Facebook is much more likely to show your posts if you upload a video directly to Facebook rather than sharing a YouTube video. They are conflicting companies or competing companies. And that's just that may feel sort of overwhelming, but it's actually a pretty easy Google search of just sort of how do the different social media platforms work? What's the best way to utilize them? Things like that. Yeah.
About Seed and Spark specifically, you said that the crowdfunding approach is both money but also there's this opportunity of donating or collaborating
yeah.
with other stuff. So let's say you need gear, right? Which sounds cool, all right? But how, if I'm donating, if I'm interested in participating in the crowdfunding, and I see that there are many things or several things that can be donated, wouldn't that hold me back like, oh,
so everything is on there as a wish list. So it's very clear that how much money you need, and people can easily just hit the make a contribution button and use that, and they can put in the dollar amount. The wish list is just, where is this money going? And there's all of the wish list items have an opportunity to either buy or loan the item. And all the loan button is that it sends a message. You hit the loan button, you send a message to the filmmaker saying, I happen to have a Red camera that is available during your shoot days if you'd like to use it. And then the filmmaker can approve that or not. But the way it's listed, it's not like donate to this item or donate to that item. Only these things can be loaned. It's all of it is available, but you as the filmmaker get to actually pick which ones can be loaned to.
That would influence someone who's interested in donating, like, oh, she's going to get that, this one's going to.
No, we don't see that at all. We really see people using it as like an educational resource. Yeah.
We only have time for one more question.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we only have one more question.
Cool. So if you want to, when you're trying to get a crowdfunding, the whole thing is that they need to see it. Do you suggest like giving them a link that they can see it when it's finished, and then it's like a private link, so you're not releasing it online, but it's like available to them even though it's going to film festivals?
Yeah, so that goes back into the delivery matters and thinking about that ahead of time. So some film festival, especially short films, it's looser, that you don't have it's kind of an online premiere before you actually get into festivals, but that would be, it's usually contingent upon the film being done or the film getting into a festival, that sort of thing. And then what's really exciting is to do like a day and date release, but just to your backer. So here's a private link, and you can only download it one time, or you can only view it one time, and it's the same time you have your festival premiere. So you have a bunch of people talking about it. But yeah, thinking about how can you do it privately, because you don't want it to be up on a VOD platform or something like that when you're trying to have a festival premiere.
Film Freeway, I don't know what people work on.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Really good way to do that.
Yeah, Film Freeway is a really wonderful way of doing that. This is the tip.
all right. So that's all for the questions.
Yes, and I have cards up here, so please come take a card. I also have stickers that are very fun. And please sign up for the newsletter in the back of the room. And please email me with your questions. I love to hear them, or come talk to me afterwards. All right. Yeah, thank you.
Janine.
I'll just take one of each. What the heck?